Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to present my third presentation. And this is related to indigenous method of selection and breeding of livestock and poultry. Now, this is one of the ways you can see in India and also in many of the developing countries, which were having very old traditions. There have been, the methods of selection and breeding of livestock has been based on the needs and aspirations of the people. Also, there is another thing which is associated with the breeding of livestock is how the best animals are suited for a given agroecology, for a given type of work the animal is expected to perform. So this is basically, I'll be giving you a few examples, and as I have to just wrap up within half an hour, as I have been told, I will be basically being a little bit in a hurry. Later on, those people who want to know more about these things, they can also get in touch with me personally. So thereby what happens is in India, the selection and breeding of livestock has been quite sophisticated, and these type of things have developed since the earliest records come from the Indus Valley civilization, where we are basically seeing the different type of bullocks, different type of sheep, goats, and also dogs have been reported in the Indus Valley civilization. Prior to that, if I go for the ancient texts like Purans, also in Ved, there have been basically instances where a specific type of livestock breeds have been mentioned, indicating that these breeds were selected based on the needs as it was required by the people of that time. And as I had been telling you before, that these are also dependent on the adaptability and the type of work the animal is expected to perform in a given agroecology. So, and also one of the things in India you have to understand as that of the developing countries, all the developing countries in the world. Today I was speaking to one of my friends from Africa also, and it is basically the adaptation and the functional traits were the ones which were of more importance than the production as it is. The production was coming in sheer number of animals being reared with very little contribution in the form of milk or others per animal, but the overall the main criteria for the selection was adaptability and climate resilient thing. And now this is again being carried out. You can know that in the 21st century we are talking about climate resilient agriculture. Hence, under such type of condition, you also have to think about climate resilient breeding of livestock or climate resilient animal husbandry as it is. And there have been also instances where, unlike the modern breeding programs, which focus predominantly on the quantitative traits, these animals earlier were selected based on the qualitative traits of the animal, which was, of course, directly or indirectly associated with the quantitative traits also. The unfortunate part in the case of Indian subcontinent is that the Indian subcontinent is by and large it is a hot and humid as well as hot and arid climate. So thereby archaeological remains of these animals are not possible under such type of agroecology, because the temperature being high and the humidity being high, so decomposition rate is also higher. So archaeological remains are very rare in case of Indian agroecology about the different type of livestock which we are basically saying. So let me come about the indigenous cattle breeding. If I say about the cattle breeding, we are dividing into two types or rather than three types of cattle. Mostly it is a draft, very less for milk, and primarily it was there that the animals have to be climate resilient, where in the draft also we are now categorizing the animal as heavy draft and a light draft. That is where the draft was basically till whenever I'm saying till the mid or till the late part of the last century also, that is the 20th century, draft was a very major thing in case of livestock, and draft animals will again play a very major role in the days to come, especially when we look into part where the oil crisis and other such type of crises are existing, going to occur. So where we come across specific breeds of livestock, we are looking into the Deccan Plateau, the selection of Poda Tharpu and Nalma, basically type of breeds. These were the breeds which have been recently identified in the Deccan area, and these things have been, very well documented over a period of time. And when it comes to the selection of the breeding bulls of Poda Tharpu and Nalama breeds, there are 14 traits specifically identified under the traditional system by the local pastoralists while selecting the bulls. This is what you can say the Poda Tharpu breed of cattle, and this is primarily one of the latest breeds which have been included in the list of indigenous livestock in India. And the trait category, as I told you before, we are basically looking into the qualitative traits. So the trait category is the protective ability of the animals. That is their ability to take care of the young ones and to ward off the predators. That was one of the criteria. Physical characteristics, coat color and texture, and the gait of the animal. That's very much important. So whenever we are looking into the biocultural protocols, also the gait of the animals, the coat color, they have a profound, role to play. Behavioral traits, the temperament of the animals, the obedience of the master's instructions is paramount importance. And the fertility indicator, that is the breeding soundness, the libido, and the serving capacity is there. Whenever I'm saying the word of breeding traits like response and the obedience to the masters, a very good example, this one comes in horses, which was basically being reported in the selection of Arabian horses during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. It was reported that the animals which were basically, the progenitors of the Arabian horses were known as al-khamsa. This was said that one of the time when, Prophet Muhammad was passing from Mecca to Medina, and that was the time, it was very, very hot, and the animals and the humans all of them were thirsty. Then came an oasis where there was water, and all the animals were left loose, and they all started running towards the oasis to drink water. And at that time, Prophet Muhammad, he basically called up the animals to stop. All but 5 animals, they did not, only 5 of the mares were such that they stopped even when they were thirsty, when to go to the oasis, when the others basically did not listen to the master and they ran towards the oasis for drinking. These 5 horses which were basically, which stopped, in spite of being thirsty, they came back to the masters, were basically termed as al-khamsa, and they were the ones who were considered as the progenitors of the Arabian breed of horses we know about. So this is, how the behavioral, the obedience to master's instructions is a very, very important behavioral trait. Again, I'm telling you, obedience of the master, of the animal to the masters, when it comes to the breeds of sheep and also the horses of Central Asia, Afghanistan is basically has been very well recorded. There were 4 years selection processes of these bulls. The breeding bulls were meticulously chosen with extreme caution and care, following a very long and meticulous selection process that would last up to 4 years before the breed, as the animal was really identified that whether it is capable of being considered for breeding or not. And all these performances were carried out across the years, different seasons, climatic conditions, working scenarios to find out the resilience of the animal across the different agroecologies under different conditions. So here, when we look into this particular thing, so the breeding system, the philosophy of these people, the local breeders of Deccan, follow open nucleus breeding system, which we always know as a breeder, and they are very, very meticulous to avoid inbreeding in the cattle herds. And that indicates that their people had a very deep understanding about the genetic diversity, which is required for the maintaining the heterozygosity in the flock and in the herd, and thereby we know if the breeding goes in breeding occurs, the fertility and the other traits are also basically they also suffer. So here, when it comes to the breeding part of it, it's only the men who are involved. Women primarily take care of the management of the calves and the animals as it is, but the men are the ones who take the decisions. It's basically a societal thing. This is what the open nucleus breeding policy is, and this is where you can have the village herds, nucleus herds, the bulls, and all those type of things are there. So in this case, you can say that how the bulls are rotated, the poorer cows are animals are identified, and the selected animals are basically taken in this whole system. Karnataka has another very interesting breed, the Amrit Mahal Hillakar, and also in Maharashtra, when we look into, is the Khilari breed. When I look into the one related to Amrit Mahal, the real one is Hillikar. Hillikar, the history of Hillikar goes that there was a very strong herd of Hillikar cattle, which was there with the Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. And it was said that in the Battle of Srirangapatnam, when the Britishers were told that Tipu Sultan did not have any cannons, and the Britishers thought of attacking Tipu Sultan because they thought that the Tipu Sultan is very much vulnerable without any cannons. But at that time, when the Tipu spies told about the intention of the Britishers, he ensured that all the major cannons from Mysore was picked up and was brought to Srirangapatnam at the shortest possible time. And it was, I think, 48 or 72 hours that these all cannons were brought in. And when the Britishers actually attacked Srirangapatnam, they were amazed to see that all the cannons which they thought was not existing and were located at Mysore were blazing and were destroying the Britishers at Srirangapatnam. After the Tipu Sultan was defeated, the Britishers ensured that the Hillikar and later on the Amrit Mahal part of it, these animals were to be kept by the prince or the king of Mysore in his personal flock or personal herd, and the Britishers ensured that these animals were conserved. So that is what Hillikar is. These animals are very good in traction. They were used for religious and cultural significance. Jallikattu, we know about it. These are, a lot of, it's of course, Jallikattu is nothing to do with Hillikar, but these were, the way the selection process occurs. The actual was strength and endurance for agricultural operations. Especially in the drought-prone area, they were the source of power when it comes to carriage of the goods and services by the bullock carts. The Amrit Mahal is a multi-utility traction and power, and they were basically for drought purpose, whereas the Maland Gidda breed is also higher adaptability, easy for maintenance, small body size, suited to hilly terrain, low input requirements, and the farmers rearing Maland Gidda basically use natural services, and that is one of the reasons is because they have lack of quality semen and artificial insemination part of it. So here you can see the Maland Gidda breed, the Amrit Mahal, and the Hillikar breed of cattle. Conformation traits for the selection of the cows was basically traits like udder size, pelvic width was one of the things which was very much critical across the breeds. Primarily, it is the pelvic width is better. Chances of dystocia is also less. So thereby the mother and the calf will not suffer and the mortality can be also managed. The Kathani cattle breed and the associated traditional practices of Maharashtra. Kathani is the 51st cattle breed which has been registered from Vidarbha region. And they were basically used for distinct genetic line in districts of Gadcholi, Gondia, and Chandrapur. And this is the Kathani breed of cattle. And also they resemble, they are actually, initially it was considered as a part of Galao breed, but now it has been given a distinct, identification of its own. Traditional selection process, low input selection, and these animals have very low nutritive content of fodder. They are, despite feed and fodder, the farmers do not provide any commercial mineral mixture to these animals, and they are selected over generations for the able to walk long distances, for their walk, for their working ability, maintenance, easy maintenance. Also, they can survive on sparse vegetation. And one of the things with the dongi, these cattle are, the Kathani cattle are there, is the fermented feed segments known as dongis. And they are basically mixed with some quantity of cuckoos, and which we call as the homemade rice bran, and fed to the working below. This fermented feed supplement, basically, they are helpful for these animals because they are source of probiotics and prebiotics, and thereby what happens is this is a method of of importance for these animals, especially when they are working under high temperature conditions. This is the dongi. These animals are also made to graze on the gohan or the community pasture, which is, of course, as you can see, the quality is very, very poor. And this actually, the gohan and the akhar is the place where these animals are consuming, they are defecating, and thereby the fertility of the soil is also improved. There again, you can see out here the gedanga or badaga, which is basically, you can see on the neck of these animals. These are the triangle shaped things which are basically used for training the bullocks for plowing purposes. This is where they are putting, they are training the bullocks by putting a weight on their neck so that they get accustomed to the plows. And this is the way why traditionally these animals are trained for plowing purposes. So akar and the badanga, which I'm basically saying, they are made. This badanga is basically made from palash tree, weighing up to 5 to 7 kilos, and the devices are kept on the calf necks for about 15 days. This helps them to get trained about carrying of loads and also the plowing purposes. The breeds targeted for conservation and selection in case of Rajasthan is Tharparkar, Gir, Sanchori, Nagori, and Rathi. The selection criteria: traditional understanding, nutrients, digestive efficiency. So they are able to, digest the poor quality forages better than that of the exotic breeds. So they are able to also live off the ground much better. They do not require a very high level of, feed and fodder. So that is again another advantage of these animals. They have, when you look into the anatomy of the rumen and others, they are, very much distinct than that of the exotic breeds. Another thing which is out there is basically the toxin. They are, my experience with the local breeds indicate that these animals know, I don't know, it's maybe due to an epigenetic reason or so, they are able to identify the toxin plants, the plants which can be poisonous. And also they are able to basically have inherent ability to flush out the extra toxins or anti-nutrition factors, which is basically present in many of the plants or the other feed material they are consuming. So this is basically an adaptive trait. And dung consistency, indigenous dung is good consistency, helps the nutrition better for the soils. This is basically scientific basis because they have the high fiber digestibility. And of course, disease tolerance is basically one of the major factors. So thereby they have a lower minimum economic losses and illnesses. So it is primarily due to co-evolution of the local pathogens, or these animals are exposed to lower doses of the pathogens from the very beginning. So they themselves, attain the tolerance to such type of diseases. So Tharparkar, Sanjori, Gir, Nagori, Rathi, these are the breeds which I'm basically talking about. Methods of selection for buffaloes under the Indian conditions, Indian knowledge systems. Primarily, the buffaloes are again selected not only for milk, but for the qualitative traits as a whole. Adaptation to the local agroecological conditions and under the low input sustainability. Buffalo selection is characterized specifically by locally adapted criteria that differ fundamentally from scientific breeding approaches. And one of the things, again, I'm telling you, is the unique selection of Bhadavri. When I was, as I had told you in the last class, I have a very deep regard for Dr. O.P.S. Sengar. And when I met Dr. O.P.S. Sengar, and I discussed with him why the reason why Bhadavri breed was selected was basically developed in places like Itar region of Uttar Pradesh. And he told me a very interesting thing. He said that earlier, every household had some animals or the other. So milk itself was of not much importance, or milk was, not a very important commodity, because selling of milk was prohibited by many communities as it is, and everyone had one or two animals of his own, or so their milk had low price. Also, transportation of milk was difficult because roads were not good. Temperature of India was pretty high, and all those type of things. So thereby the farmers at that time, they sat down to develop a breed which is having high fat percentage with low milk yield. Now, when the fat percentage is high, that means these animals have an ability to have more amount of acetate, volatile fatty acid, which is converting the low quality fiber into fats. And these animals are such that they are able to, these people will be basically, having 20, 30, 40 bullocks, mostly used as a source of dung for agriculture purposes. The milk, which was from about 2 kilos, 1.5, 2 kilos, 3 kilos per animal, lesser in quantity, easier for the female in the house to churn it into butter. High amount of butter would be basically converted into ghee. So thereby anyone who was traveling from the rural area to cities like Agra, Gwalior, in that area, in those places, it was easier for them to transport ghee rather than transport the liquid milk on a daily basis. So they basically selected for ghee, and anyone who is going to places like Agra, Gwalior, any traders going, for them carrying 15 kilo ghee or 20 kilo ghee was easier than to carry 200 or 400 or 5,500 liters of milk, because milk will get curdled. Ghee does not require any refrigeration. So that was the criteria for selection of these animals. So the indigenous selection systems were qualitative traits, coat color, horn shape, body conformation. These are all traits which are qualitative in nature but have correlation with the quantitative characters. Milk yield in liters and fat percentages basically, very much of importance, and they have something to coat color and body conformation had something to do, these qualitative traits, with that of the quantitative in nature. Again, I give you a very great example. It was there when I was in Africa. One of the farmers told me that the criteria for selecting his animals, bullock, the cattle, was to check the whole of the hair on the forehead. And if the whole of the hair, that means the movement of the hair near the forehead, if it is an anti-clockwise direction, he said that the animal will give me more amount of milk. And can you imagine, the hair on the forehead is correlated with the amount of milk the animal is going to produce. And later on, when I was, going for scientific explanation of it, I got similar type of results being reported from India and Pakistan, that the farmers select the animals based on the way the hairs are there on the forehead. Adaptation, again, a very big criteria. High input, low controlled environment was not there, so adaptation was important. Multi-utility, milk, draft, dung, cultural value. Milk was the least, draft was the most, followed by dung, and cultural value is basically that the per person having more number of animals was considered as important in the society. Which single purpose was basically not there. So milk production is now, as a scientific purpose, we say milk production is the criteria, but initially it was the draft and the dung, followed by milk and cultural value. Visual and tactile evaluation of the experienced breeders who looked at the animals from the very younger shape, and they basically try to find out what the animals will result when it is mature. This was also observed by me when I was into community-based breeding program in Ethiopia, where I was basically teaming up with the people from Ikada, and I found out that the selection of the lambs of Bonga breed were based on certain characters shown by those animals, especially the toggles, which were shown by the animals at the time of birth. And at the time of birth, those animals were selected basically because those were having these important traits and were provided with special ration and were later on used as breeding animals. So community-based decentralization selection was also there, and long-term multi-generation observation was there. It was not recorded, but these were oral traditions which were passed from one generation of humans to another later as the time progressed. In it, another breed of cattle, which buffalo, which is of importance, is the Toda buffalo, which is basically from Tamil Nadu. Selection is basically based on phenotypic characters, and these are very much important. This is the Toda buffalo, you can see. And these animals, the selection is basically body color, horns, different type of markings. There are two distinctive chevron V-shaped marking on the neck region, indicating the purity of the breed. The tail, the body, the head, these were the characters which were basically of importance. Cultural practices, basically, as you see, they were each buffalo has its own name. Whenever you are calling the buffalo by the name, the buffalo, even if it is grazing in the wild, comes over to the owner after hearing its name. They are also exchanged as dowries in many places. Ceremonial slaughter is there, and basically these animals are taken from one location to other in the seasonal migration. Breeding system, there's basically the Toda have a distinct breeding system where no males are maintained in the herd. So female cows are sired by buffalo stud bulls, which are basically roaming in the forest, and these bulls are the ones which are able to fight away with the wild animals in the forest, indicating that they are physically very strong, and thereby the natural mating takes place out there. And the performance of the animal is also being maintained. Again, the criteria is fat percentage, you can say. Marathwadi buffalo selection is under low input system, and these are basically are there in different parts of Marathwada region. They are basically maintained by small and marginal farmers. And another thing of the selection is primarily to survive under low external import system. This is the Marathwadi buffalo out. A low maintenance, feed conversion efficiency, moderate milk production, physical corrections have been indicated. Another thing is the Daria buffalo of Bihar. The natural selection is the key out here, and this is basically the animals which are selected in around Buxar and Rajmahal districts. These animals are different than that of the Murrah, may have been crossed with the Murrah in some parts or the other. And these animals are the ones who can survive under the flooded condition of that region, because those regions basically face floods. And these animals are able to, as I said, named Daria, that is, these animals can survive under the flooded conditions under the Ganga, Son, Gandak river of that area. This is the Dasheria and the Bawani buffaloes, which is there. Bawani buffaloes are again from Gujarat, able to survive under low input system. Interesting thing about the Bawani buffaloes is the nighttime grazing. They are the night grazers, unlike that of the other animals graze in the day. Bawani grazes in the night primarily because the daytime is very, very hot. Sparse vegetation, night is cool, so Bawani is used in those type of vegetations out here. That is again the things which is there. Disease resistance is basically the one which is of importance, and the drought resistance, night grazing adaptation is very much important. And here, the physical selection criteria traditional have been basically indicated, and we can basically discuss on it in detail when I have more time, and and I'll be thankful to the Meadow Agriculture if they give me more time later on discussing all these traits. Another breed, Murra, of course, we know that they are the best animal, which is for dairy selection. And they have been refined over generations, oral tradition. One of the best things which I saw was this, Murra is known by the white switch. I was trained to evaluate Murra when I was when I was serving in Rajasthan at Bharatpur. Those areas where I was, there was I think Tuesday or Wednesday is the time when there is an animal fair in Bharatpur. It was long back, I still don't remember. And that is the place where I was trained by the local breeders how to recognize a good Murra and how to basically, put a price on it. So, of course, the selection criteria, traditional selection criteria is there. The interesting is the tail, which has basically the switch, will have, black or white color. That is very important. This is the criteria. Traditional breeding practices. The Jafrabadi, again, one of the largest buffalo breeds. I saw one of them lately in Bangladesh. Oh, what an animal it was! It was nearly a ton in weight. The buffalo. And the head was maybe around about 2 feet, 2.5 feet across the head. This thick was the head, and about a ton in size, and excellent animals. And they have a very typical thing is the sleepy eyes and the sturdy eyes, especially in the case of the males. The Jafrabadi, the largest buffalo breed and these animals were trained primarily to fight against the lions of the Gir forest. Jafrabadi. The selection criteria have been basically said, how the animals are there. Godavari, again, I saw you, epitome of milk fat. How these animals are selected, criteria have been set. The Godavari, qualitative trait and the indigenous selection systems and the modern selection systems are also being discussed. Then again, when I say about the goat, the Narayanpatna goat in case of Odisha, and this is the breed which was found in the hilly tracts of Narayanpatna and Bandhugaon blocks of Odisha, Koraput district. These are basically used for tribal communities of Kond and Poroja, and they are not only the source of milk and income, but a symbol of social and cultural identity of the tribes. In the near future, maybe about a month or after a month or so, I will be there in that area for selection of these animals, the Narayanpatna goats in case of Odisha, and I'll be kind of work out there. Gaddi goats of Himachal and Chamtangi goats of Leh, again important. राय का शिक्षा। हाँ बोलो भाई, मैं प्रेजेंटेशन में हूँ, कर रहा हूँ, तो बात करता हूँ। हाँ हाँ, नहीं शुरू हो गया, ज्वाइन कर लो। So the Raika sheep pastoralists of Rajasthan, I had been seeing this Raika community even till Bhopal. When I was in Bhopal in 2020-21, I saw this community going from Bikaner till Bhopal, along with the sheep and goat. And these are the people, they are basically keeping the animals. The breeds which are there is Boti and Bhagli. Official name is Marwadi and Sonadi, and they are basically used in arid conditions based for their dual purpose of meat and wool as it is. Marwadi breed, Sonadi, you can see to it, and the strength of the red turban is what are the people from Raika community is excellent, very well, hard-working community. They have been working with, Dr. Ilse is working on this community for the last at least 30 years, as far as I know. Ilse Koiler-Rolfsen, and she is also, propagating the way the Raika community is thriving on the breeding of camels, as it is. So these are what it is, and then you can indigenous selection and breeding of chickens and ducks. These are basically coming out in India, and in case of the chickens, I should give me at least 3 minutes to speak about asil. Oh, what a beautiful animal, bird they are. I had been, associated with this asil when I was a student at Pantnagar. I used to have two Rampur hounds in my hostel room, and I used to visit Rampur very often. And also, there's a place known as Horatanda near Bareilly, and that is the place where I could see the Rampur asil. Asil has actually a couple of strains. One of them is the Rampur asil, which is shorter in animal structure than that of the asil from Hyderabad. And these asils are used primarily for cockfighting. And there is another strain of asil which I see in Odisha also. So they are basically, the asil chickens, as you can see, the way their stances with the way the animals, these birds are developed. I was very much associated with how these asil birds are trained by the Rampur traditional breeders, how they are using these birds with a little amount of, similar to that of the rice grain, or even when it starts with the size of masoor dana, that is the lentil, shape of lentil. They use the opium to feed these. The opium is fed to these birds in very minute quantity from very younger age. So what happens is that when the animals are basically accustomed to this opium, they do not feel the pain when they are fighting, and they really fight in the stance of opium. That is where the Rampur asil breed was developed, and it was really wonderful to see. So the body conformation, plumage, beaks, and others. Kadaknath again. You can see the Kadaknath. Of course, I have fibromelanin. I had been reporting about the fibromelanin breed from Sikkim also. This breed in Sikkim is there. I have seen it in Chakung as well as I've seen it in Lachung also. These breeds are kept for traditional purposes by the Jakaris in that region in Sikkim. Pati duck in Assam, West Bengal. I'm just searching. Then you have the selection of horses, donkeys, and camels. And when I come to horses, Marwadi, Kathiawadi, and Sindhi type of horses. The Spiti ponies, the Bhotia ponies, the Zanskari ponies, the ones which are basically the beast of burden from in the Himalayan region, and the Manipuri Pole ponies, considered as one of the best in the world so far. Of course, they are all suffering from lack of proper breeding, and the traditional breeders are now not being encouraged enough. And these are basically, initially they were being encouraged by the kings and the princes, but now they are lacking proper encouragement. When it comes to the traditional breeding of camels, I say the Bikaner camel crop. And the Bikaner camel, of course, some amount of work is being carried out by NRC on camels, but the traditional Bikaneri camel, and also there are other draft purposes camels, the camels for, riding purposes camels are different. So we can discuss it on later on. Thank you for your kind attention, and thank you, Meadow Agriculture. I have to shut up. भैया बहुत जल्दी करना पड़ा क्योंकि people are waiting maybe. Okay.
So much, sir.
Okay. Later on.
Participants have any query?
Any queries for the participants, please?